The Seamstress Who Became a Duchess, a story of survival, scandal, and forbidden love. They said she didn't belong, that a girl like her, poor, common, invisible, had no business breathing the same air as dukes and lords. And they were right, until the night Lena Varelli opened the wrong door and stumbled into a world that would either crown her or kill her. What happened next sparked the scandal of the century, turned enemies into hunters, and forced a cold-hearted duke to make an impossible choice. Stay with me until the end to see how one wrong turn changed everything. And don't forget to hit that like button and comment what city you're watching from. Part 1. A Wrong Door, a Dangerous World. The hem came loose again. Lena Varelli sat cross-legged on the servant's bench in the kitchen corridor of Thornwood Estate, her needle moving fast, her fingers stained with chalk dust and thread dye. The dress she was mending wasn't hers. Nothing here was hers. It belonged to some lady's maid who'd torn it rushing down the stairs, and now Lena had 20 minutes to fix it before the evening reception began upstairs. 20 minutes. That's all she ever got. Scraps of time between errands, between being invisible. She bit off the thread with her teeth, shook out the fabric, and stood. The corridor was empty now, the other servants already upstairs preparing for the flood of nobles who'd descended on Thornwood for the Duke's winter gathering. Lena's mother had brought her along, just this once, she'd said, to help with last-minute alterations. A favor to the housekeeper. A chance to see how the upper world lived. Lena wished she'd stayed home. She folded the dress over her arm and started down the hallway, her worn boots silent on the polished stone. The estate was a maze. Endless corridors branching into parlors, libraries, sitting rooms she'd never see the inside of. She'd been told to stay in the servants' wing, to keep her head down, to remember her place. But the housekeeper had sent her to the second floor to return the dress, and now Lena was lost. She stopped at a fork in the corridor. Left or right? Both looked identical. Tall ceilings, dark wood paneling, portraits of stern-faced ancestors glaring down at her like she was dirt on their shoes. Left. She went left. The hallway narrowed. The portraits grew larger, older. No servants here. No sound except her own breathing and the faint hum of voices echoing from somewhere far away. She should turn back. She knew she should. But the corridor kept pulling her forward, and she convinced herself the stairs had to be just ahead, just around the next corner. She turned the corner and walked straight into a door. Not a hallway. A door. Lena stopped, her heart kicking hard. The door was cracked open just barely, golden lamplight spilling through the gap. She should leave, she should run. But something made her hesitate. A voice, low and cold, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You're telling me the shipment was lost?" A pause. Not lost. Stolen. Lena's breath caught. She shouldn't be hearing this. She pressed herself against the wall, clutching the dress tighter, ready to bolt. But her boot caught the edge of the door. It swung open, and she stumbled inside. The room was a study. Dark, elegant. Shelves of leather-bound books, a desk carved from black oak, and two men standing near the fireplace, both turning to stare at her like she'd just crawled out of the chimney. Lena froze. The first man was older, heavy-set, his face flushed red with anger or wine, or both. The second man was the Duke, Alaric Thorne. She'd never seen him up close before, no one like her ever did. But she knew him the way everyone knew him, by reputation, by rumor, by the cold weight of his name, tall, dark-haired, sharp-featured like something carved from marble and left out in the winter to freeze. His eyes were pale gray, the kind of gray that didn't blink, didn't soften, didn't forgive. And right now, they were locked on her. "Who the hell are you?" The older man's voice cracked through the silence. Lena's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Her fingers twisted in the fabric of the dress, her pulse hammering so loud she thought they could hear it. I'm sorry, Sorry? The man's face darkened. "Do you have any idea where you are?" "I got lost. I didn't mean lost?" He stepped toward her, his bulk filling the space between them. "You expect us to believe that? A servant girl just happens to wander into the Duke's private study during a confidential meeting? It was an accident. An accident," he sneered. "How much did they pay you? Who sent you?" "No one sent me." Lena's voice cracked, desperation bleeding through. I swear I was just trying to find the stairs. I didn't hear anything. I didn't see. You didn't see? The man laughed, sharp and ugly. You're standing in the room. Lena's legs felt like water. She wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor, to undo the last 5 minutes of her life. But the man kept coming, his voice rising, and she realized with a sick jolt that he thought she was a spy. Please, I'm just a seamstress's daughter. I don't know anything about seamstress. The man spat the word like it tasted rotten. You think that makes it better? You think we're going to let some commoner walk out of here after what she's heard? I didn't hear anything. Liar. The word hit her like a slap. Lena's chest tightened, her vision blurring at the edges. She looked past the man toward the Duke, silently begging him to say something, to stop this, But Alaric Thorne hadn't moved. He stood by the fireplace, one hand resting on the mantel, watching her with those cold, unreadable eyes. His face gave away nothing. No anger, no concern, just calculation. Like she was a problem he was deciding how to solve. The older man grabbed her arm. We'll take her to the housekeeper. Let her explain to the magistrate why she was sneaking around. Let her go! The Duke's voice cut through the room like a knife through silk. The older man stopped. His grip on Lena's arm loosened, but didn't release. Your Grace? I said let her go. The man's face twisted with confusion. But she heard nothing. Alaric's tone didn't rise, didn't waver. It simply was, as final as a door slamming shut. She's a servant. She got lost. That's all. Your Grace, with all due respect, we can't just... We can, and we will. Alaric's gaze shifted to Lena, and for a moment she felt the full weight of it, cold, sharp, dissecting. Go. Lena didn't need to be told twice. She wrenched her arm free, clutched the dress to her chest, and ran. She didn't stop until she reached the servants' quarters. Her lungs burned. Her hand shook so hard she could barely hold the dress. She shoved it onto a hook, pressed her back against the wall, and tried to breathe. What had just happened? She'd stumbled into the Duke's study. She'd interrupted something important, something secret, and instead of throwing her out, instead of calling the magistrate, or worse, he'd let her go. Why? Lena closed her eyes, her mind racing. She hadn't heard much, just fragments, a shipment, stolen. But that was enough, wasn't it? Enough to get her branded a spy, a thief, a threat. And yet he'd protected her. Or had he? The thought sent a chill down her spine. Maybe he hadn't protected her at all. Maybe he'd just decided she wasn't worth the trouble. A seamstress's daughter, no name, no power, no one who'd miss her if she disappeared. Lena swallowed hard and pushed off the wall. It didn't matter. She'd stay out of sight for the rest of the night, help her mother pack up, and leave Thornwood Estate behind forever. She'd never have to see the Duke again, never have to think about those cold gray eyes or the way he'd looked at her like she was something to be calculated, measured, and dismissed. She'd forget this ever happened. But Thornwood Estate had other plans. The reception was already underway when Lena's mother found her. There you are! Maris Varelli's voice was sharp with relief. She grabbed Lena's shoulder, steering her toward the kitchen. Where have you been? The housekeeper's been asking for you. I got lost, Lena muttered. Lost? Her mother's eyes narrowed. Lena, I told you to stay in the servants' wing. I know, no excuses. You're lucky the housekeeper didn't send you home already. Maris sighed, her expression softening just a fraction. Come on. There's a tear in Lady Verena's shawl. You need to fix it before she notices. Lena nodded and followed her mother through the maze of corridors, her mind still tangled in what had happened upstairs. Lady Verena. She'd heard that name before, one of the Duke's guests. Someone important. They reached a small parlor off the main hall, and Maris handed her a shawl made of silk so fine it felt like water in Lena's hands. Careful, her mother warned. That's worth more than we make in a year. Lena sat down and threaded her needle, her hands moving on instinct. The tear was small, barely visible, but it had to be perfect. Everything had to be perfect here. She was halfway through the repair when the door opened. Lena didn't look up. She assumed it was her mother returning, or maybe another servant. But the footsteps that entered were too slow, too deliberate. And then a voice. smooth and cold as winter glass. So you're the girl who got lost. Lena's hand stilled. She looked up. The Duke stood in the doorway. Peace. Alaric Thorne didn't look like a man who'd just let a potential spy walk free. He looked like a man who'd already decided what he wanted and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. He stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. Lena's pulse spiked. She set the shawl down carefully, her fingers trembling. Your Grace, You don't need to apologize again. His voice was calm, almost bored. I'm not here for that. Then why? Because you created a problem. Lena's stomach dropped. I didn't mean to. I know. He crossed the room, stopping a few feet away from her, close enough that she could see the sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar along his temple. But intent doesn't matter. Lord Cameron thinks you're a spy. By tomorrow morning, half the estate will think the same. But I'm not. I know that too. He tilted his head, studying her with that same unsettling calm. But perception is stronger than truth, and right now the perception is that a common girl wandered into my private study at exactly the wrong moment. Lena's throat tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying you have two choices. Alaric's gaze didn't waver. You can leave tonight, go home, disappear, and hope that Lord Cameron's suspicion dies with your absence. Or you stay. Lena blinked. Stay? Here, at Thornwood, under my protection. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena stared at him, trying to make sense of what she was hearing. Stay? Under his protection? That didn't make any sense. Why would a duke, the Duke, offer protection to a seamstress's daughter? I don't understand, she said slowly. You don't need to. Alaric's tone was flat, matter-of-fact. You need to decide. But why would you? Because if you leave, Lord Cameron will assume you're guilty. He'll spread that assumption. And once it spreads, your family becomes a target. Your mother. Your reputation. Everything. He paused. If you stay, I control the narrative. Lena's hands clenched in her lap. And what narrative is that? For the first time, something almost like amusement flickered in his eyes. That you're not a spy, he said. You're my guest. Go on. Lena didn't sleep that night. She lay on the narrow cot in the servants' quarters, staring at the ceiling, her mind spinning in circles. The Duke's offer, if it even was an offer, made no sense. Stay at Thornwood? As his guest? She was nobody. A seamstress's daughter with no name, no title, no reason for anyone to notice her. And yet he had noticed. Why? She rolled onto her side, pulling the thin blanket tighter around her shoulders. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe he felt responsible for what happened in the study. Or maybe, and this thought made her stomach twist, maybe he had his own reasons. Reasons that had nothing to do with protecting her and everything to do with protecting himself. Either way, she'd agreed. Not because she trusted him, not because she had any illusions about what guest really meant in a place like this, but because the alternative was worse. Going home meant dragging her mother into whatever mess Lord Cameron wanted to create. It meant questions, accusations, suspicion that would follow them for years. At least here, she had a chance. A small one. A dangerous one. But a chance. Bosam. Morning came too fast. Lena was woken by a sharp knock on the door, followed by a maid she didn't recognize sweeping into the room with an armful of clothes. You're to dress and come upstairs, the maid said, her tone brisk and impersonal. The Duchess wants to see you. Lena sat up, her heart lurching. The Duchess? The Dowager Duchess, the maid corrected, dropping the clothes onto the cot. The Duke's grandmother. She doesn't like to be kept waiting. And with that, she left. Lena stared at the clothes. A dress. Simple, but far finer than anything she'd ever worn. Soft gray wool, clean lines, no embroidery or lace. The kind of dress that said respectable without saying noble. She dressed quickly, her hands shaking. The Dowager Duchess. She'd heard stories about her. Everyone had. A woman who'd outlived 2 husbands, buried a son, and raised a grandson as cold and ruthless as winter itself. They said she ran Thornwood with an iron hand, that even the Duke deferred to her in matters of the estate. And now Lena was about to meet her. The Dowager Duchess's sitting room was smaller than Lena expected, but twice as intimidating. Every surface gleamed. The furniture was dark and heavy, the kind that had been there for generations and would be there for generations more. Portraits lined the walls, men and women with sharp eyes and sharper cheekbones, all of them looking down at Lena like they knew exactly what she was. An intruder. The Dowager sat near the window, her posture so straight it looked painful. She was older than Lena's mother, but not by much, 60, maybe 65. Her hair was silver, pulled back in a severe knot. Her dress was black, high-necked, unadorned, and her eyes were the same pale gray as the Duke's. "Come in," she said, her voice clipped. "Close the door." Lena obeyed, her pulse hammering. The Dowager studied her for a long moment, her gaze traveling from Lena's face to her dress to her hands, still faintly stained with dye. "Sit." Lena sat. The Dowager poured tea from a silver pot, her movements precise and deliberate. She didn't offer Lena any. "My grandson," she said finally, "has made a very unusual decision." Lena's throat tightened. "Your Grace, I wasn't asking for an explanation." The Dowager set the teapot down with a soft clink. "I was stating a fact. Alaric does not make unusual decisions. He is calculated, controlled. Every move he makes serves a purpose." She paused. "So tell me, Miss Varelli, what purpose do you serve?" The question hit like a trap snapping shut. Lena swallowed. "I don't know." "You don't know?" The Dowager's lips thinned. "How refreshing. Honesty from a girl who stumbled into a private meeting and somehow convinced my grandson to shield her from scandal." "I didn't convince him of anything," Lena said, her voice sharper than she intended. "He made the choice himself, and you accepted." "I didn't have a choice." "Everyone has a choice, Miss Varelli." The Dowager leaned back in her chair, her eyes cold and assessing. "You could have left, gone home, taken your chances. But you stayed. Why?" Lena met her gaze, refusing to look away. "Because leaving would have hurt my mother." For the first time, something almost like approval flickered in the Dowager's expression. "Good," she said. "At least you're not a fool." She stood, crossing to the window. Outside, the estate grounds stretched out in endless green, manicured and perfect. "My grandson has told the household that you are a guest," the Dowager said. "A distant acquaintance of the family here for the winter gathering. That lie will hold for now, but lies require maintenance, Miss Varelli, and you are not equipped to maintain this one." Lena's chest tightened. "Then what do you want me to do?" The Dowager turned, her gaze sharp as a blade. "I want you to learn." And learn she did. For the next 3 days, Lena was drilled, molded, and reshaped like clay on a potter's wheel. The Dowager assigned her a tutor, a stern woman named Miss Clarence who spoke in clipped sentences and corrected Lena's every move with the patience of a stone. Posture, diction, etiquette. The way she held a teacup, the way she addressed a lord, the way she walked across a room without looking like she was trying to disappear. It was exhausting. "Again," Miss Clarence said, her voice flat. Lena stood, smoothed her skirt, and crossed the room for the 20th time that morning. Her feet ached, her back ached. Her pride had given up and left hours ago. "Better," Miss Clarence said, which was the closest thing to praise Lena had heard all week. "But you're still looking at the floor. A guest does not apologize for existing." Lena bit back a reply and tried again. At night, she collapsed onto her cot, no longer in the servants' quarters, but in a small guest room on the 3rd floor, and stared at the ceiling, wondering what she'd gotten herself into. The Duke, for his part, was nowhere to be seen. She'd caught glimpses of him, passing through hallways, speaking with guests in low tones, but he never approached her, never acknowledged her. It was like she'd been filed away, a problem solved and forgotten. And yet, everywhere she went, she felt eyes on her. The other guests had started to notice. It happened on the 4th night, during dinner. Lena had been permitted to join the evening meal, a test, the Dowager had said, to see if she could hold her own. The dining room was vast, the table long enough to seat 30, every surface gleaming with crystal and silver. Lena sat near the far end, her hands folded in her lap, trying to look like she belonged. She didn't. Across the table, a woman with auburn hair and a smile like poisoned honey leaned toward her companion, her voice just loud enough to carry. "I heard she's a friend of the family," the woman said, her tone dripping with mockery, "though no one seems to know which family." Her companion laughed softly. Lena's face burned, but she kept her eyes on her plate. "Perhaps she's a charity case," another voice chimed in. "The Duke does love his projects." More laughter. Lena's fingers tightened around her fork. And then, from the head of the table, a voice cut through the noise like a whip crack. "Lady Verena." The laughter stopped. The Duke didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply looked at the woman with the auburn hair, his expression cold and utterly devoid of humor. "If you have something to say about my guest," he said quietly, "say it to me." The room went silent. Lady Verena's smile faltered. "I meant no offense, Your Grace." "Of course you didn't." Alaric's tone was ice. "You never do." He turned his attention back to his meal, and the conversation resumed, quieter now, more careful. Lena exhaled slowly, her pulse still racing. Across the table, Lady Verena's eyes found hers, and in them, Lena saw something worse than mockery. She saw a promise. The war began the next morning, though most people wouldn't have recognized it as such. Lena learned quickly that aristocratic warfare didn't look like fists or shouting. It looked like smiles, like casual remarks dropped into conversation with surgical precision, like invitations extended and then quietly rescinded, like doors that closed just as you reached them. Lady Verena Ashford was a master of it. She appeared in the drawing room 3 days after the dinner incident, dressed in emerald silk that made her auburn hair shine like copper. She settled onto the settee across from where Lena sat with Miss Clarence, practicing needlework that Lena didn't need practice in but was required to demonstrate anyway. "Miss Varelli," Verena said, her voice honey-sweet, "what a charming piece you're working on. So rustic." Lena kept her eyes on her stitches. "Thank you, Lady Verena." "You must teach me sometime. I'm afraid my education focused more on music and languages than practical skills." She smiled. "But then we all have our strengths, don't we?" Miss Clarence's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Lena set down her needle carefully. "I'd be happy to teach you, though I suspect you'd find it dull." "Oh, I doubt that." Verena leaned forward, her eyes glittering. "I find everything about you utterly fascinating, Miss Varelli, particularly how a seamstress's daughter ends up as a guest at Thornwood. The Duke must be extraordinarily charitable." The words landed like stones in still water. Lena met her gaze directly. "He is." "How fortunate for you." Verena's smile widened. "Though I do wonder what you did to earn such favor." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Miss Clarence stood abruptly. "Lady Verena, I believe the Dowager Duchess requires your presence in the music room." "Does she?" Verena rose gracefully, smoothing her skirts. "How kind of you to remind me, Miss Clarence." "Though I don't recall receiving such a summons." "You have now." Verena's eyes narrowed, but her smile never faltered. She dipped her head toward Lena. "We'll continue this conversation later, Miss Varelli. I do so enjoy our chats." She swept from the room, leaving behind the faint scent of roses and malice. Lena exhaled slowly, her hands shaking. "Don't let her rattle you," Miss Clarence said, returning to her seat. "That's what she wants. She thinks I'm the Duke's mistress. She thinks you're a threat." Miss Clarence picked up Lena's abandoned needlework, examining it with a critical eye. "Lady Verena has been circling His Grace for 2 years. She expected an offer by now. Your arrival complicated things." Lena's stomach twisted. "But I'm not. There's nothing between the Duke and me." "Truth doesn't matter here." Miss Clarence handed back the needlework. "Only perception. And right now the perception is that you have something she wants. His attention. His protection." Miss Clarence's expression was grave, which is far more valuable and far more dangerous. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She paced her small room, her mind churning through everything Miss Clarence had said. The Dowager's lessons were starting to make sense now, not just etiquette for etiquette's sake, but armor. Every rule, every gesture, every carefully chosen word was a weapon in a war Lena hadn't known she was fighting. She stopped at the window, looking out over the estate grounds. Moonlight painted everything silver and black. Beautiful, cold, unforgiving. A knock at the door startled her. Lena turned, her heart jumping. It was past midnight. No one should be. "It's me!" The Duke's voice, low and unmistakable. Lena crossed to the door, hesitated, then opened it. Alaric stood in the hallway, still dressed for the evening in dark formal wear. He looked tired, she realized, the kind of tired that came from carrying weight no one else could see. "We need to talk," he said. Lena stepped back, letting him enter. He closed the door behind him but didn't move further into the room, just stood there, taking up space, his presence filling every corner. "Lady Verena approached you today," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you—" "I have eyes everywhere." He rubbed his temple. "What did she say?" Lena crossed her arms. "She implied I'm sleeping with you in exchange for your protection." Alaric's expression didn't change. "And what did you say?" "Nothing." Miss Clarence intervened. "Good." He turned toward the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Verena's dangerous. She's connected, ambitious, and she doesn't forget slights." "I didn't slight her. I didn't do anything." "You exist. That's enough." He glanced back at her. "She sees you as competition." Lena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Competition? For what?" "I'm nobody." "You're someone I'm protecting." His voice was flat. "That makes you somebody." The words settled between them like a stone dropping into water. Lena sank onto the edge of her bed, suddenly exhausted. "This was a mistake. I should leave." "No." "Why not? Every day I stay here, it gets worse. People talk. They stare. Lady Verena isn't the only one who thinks." "I know what they think." Alaric moved away from the window, stopping a few feet from her. "And I don't care." "Well, I do." Lena looked up at him, frustration bleeding into her voice. "I care that people think I'm some kind of opportunist. I care that my presence here is destroying whatever reputation you were trying to protect." "Your reputation," he corrected. "Not mine. Mine was already destroyed." Lena blinked. "What?" For the first time, something cracked in his controlled facade. Not much, just a hairline fracture. But enough. "You want to know why I protected you that night?" he said quietly. "It wasn't charity. It wasn't guilt. It was self-interest." "I don't understand." "My wife died 3 years ago." The words came out flat, rehearsed, like he'd said them so many times they'd lost meaning. "Childbirth. The baby didn't survive either." Lena's breath caught. "Afterward, society expected me to mourn publicly, to wear black, to withdraw from social life for a respectable period." His jaw tightened. "I didn't. I buried them and went back to work. The estate doesn't run itself. And I had obligations. But that made me cold, heartless, the Duke who didn't love his own wife." "People are cruel," Lena said softly. "People are predictable." He met her eyes. "When you stumbled into my study, Lord Cameron assumed the worst. If I'd let him spread that assumption, you'd be ruined. But if I protected you, if I claimed you were a guest, it would raise different questions, softer questions." Understanding dawned slowly. "They'd think you cared about someone again. They'd think I was capable of it." He turned away. "Which serves my purposes." Lena stared at his back, trying to process what he was telling her. "So I'm... what? A performance?" "You're a solution to a problem." He glanced over his shoulder. "The same way I'm a solution to yours. We're useful to each other." The coldness of it should have stung, but instead Lena felt something almost like relief. At least this was honest. Transactional. No illusions about charity or kindness or anything that might make her feel indebted. "What happens when we stop being useful?" she asked. Alaric's expression was unreadable. "We'll cross that bridge when we come to it." The following week brought the Thornwood Hunt, an annual tradition where nobles from across the region descended on the estate to slaughter deer and pretend they were warriors. Lena was excused from riding. She'd never been on a horse in her life, but she was expected to attend the midday luncheon where the hunters would gather to boast about their kills. Miss Clarence had prepared her for this. The hunt was one of the most important social events of the season. Everyone who mattered would be there, including Lady Verena. Lena dressed carefully, choosing a deep blue gown the dowager had provided. Simple, but elegant. She twisted her dark hair into a knot at the base of her neck, pinned it securely, and studied herself in the mirror. She looked the part. That's all this was. A part to play. The luncheon was held in the East Pavilion, an open structure overlooking the grounds. Tables draped in white linen, servants circulating with wine and delicate pastries. The hunters arrived in waves, men flushed with exertion and triumph, women trailing behind them in riding habits and carefully arranged smiles. Lena stood near the edge of the pavilion, a glass of wine in her hand that she hadn't touched. She'd learned that holding something gave her an excuse to look occupied. Miss Varelli. She turned to find a young man approaching, his smile easy and his eyes curious. He was handsome in an unremarkable way, fair-haired, clean-shaven, the kind of face that would blend into a crowd. Lord Philip Hastings, he said, offering a slight bow. We haven't been formally introduced, but I've heard much about you. I'm sure you have. Lena's tone was carefully neutral. All good things, he assured her, though his smile suggested otherwise. I understand you're a friend of the family. A guest? Of course. He sipped his wine, studying her with open interest. It's unusual, isn't it? The Duke isn't known for his hospitality. Perhaps you don't know him as well as you think. Philip laughed. Perhaps not. Though I've known Alaric since we were boys. We attended school together, hunted together, got drunk together, more times than I can count. He leaned in conspiratorially. He's never mentioned you. Lena kept her expression blank. Should he have? If you're such a close friend? Yes. Philip's eyes gleamed. Unless, of course, the friendship is more recent. Before Lena could respond, another voice cut in. Philip, you're being tedious. Alaric appeared at Lena's side, his presence immediate and unmistakable. Philip straightened, his smile faltering. Your Grace, I was just boring Miss Varelli with your hunting stories. I heard. Alaric's tone was pleasant, but there was steel underneath. Go bore someone else. Philip's jaw tightened, but he nodded and retreated. Lena exhaled slowly. Thank you. Don't thank me. Alaric handed her a fresh glass of wine. Philip's harmless, just nosy. Everyone here is nosy. Everyone here is a predator. He scanned the crowd, his expression unreadable. They're just better dressed than the deer. Despite herself, Lena almost smiled. Then she saw Lady Verena watching them from across the pavilion, her eyes sharp as knives. The trap was sprung an hour later. Lena had been cornered near the dessert table by a group of women whose names she'd already forgotten. They smiled and asked polite questions that weren't polite at all, and Lena answered with the careful deflection Miss Clarence had taught her. Then Verena arrived. Ladies, she said warmly, joining their circle, I hope you're not interrogating poor Miss Varelli too harshly. She's still new to our ways. We're just getting to know her, one of the women said. Of course. Verena's smile was radiant. Though I must confess, I'm curious myself. Miss Varelli, you mentioned your mother is a seamstress, didn't you? Lena's spine stiffened. I did. How wonderful, such an honest trade. Verena sipped her wine delicately. Where is she working now? I'm always in need of alterations. She takes private commissions. Private commissions? How discreet. Verena's tone was light, but her eyes were calculating. And your father? What does he do? The question hit like a blow. Lena's throat tightened. She'd been prepared for questions about her mother, her background, her sudden appearance at Thornwood. But no one had asked about her father because most people in this world assumed fathers didn't matter unless they had titles. My father passed away when I was young, Lena said quietly. Verena's expression shifted into something approximating sympathy. Oh, how tragic. What did he do before he died? He was a laborer. A laborer. Verena repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the air. How difficult that must have been for your mother, raising a daughter alone, no inheritance, no family support. And yet here you are, a guest at Thornwood. She tilted her head. One might even call it miraculous. The other women had gone silent, watching. Lena's hands clenched at her sides. She knew what Verena was doing, painting a picture. Poor girl, desperate circumstances catches the eye of a wealthy duke. The story wrote itself. My mother worked hard. Lena said, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. She taught me to do the same. I don't consider that miraculous. I consider it survival. Survival, Verena smiled. What a very practical way of looking at things. Though I suppose when one comes from limited means, practicality becomes necessary. Better than entitlement. The words were out before Lena could stop them. The silence that followed was deafening. Verena's smile froze. The other women exchanged glances, some shocked, some delighted. Lena's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd just broken the cardinal rule Miss Clarence had drilled into her. Never engage directly, never rise to the bait, never show anger. But she was done pretending. "Excuse me," Verena said, her voice cold as winter. "What did you say?" "I said, Miss Varelli was just leaving." The Dowager Duchess materialized beside Lena like a ghost. Her expression was serene, her voice pleasant, but her grip on Lena's elbow was iron. "Come, my dear. The Duke requires your presence." She steered Lena away from the group before anyone could respond. They walked in silence across the grounds, away from the pavilion toward the gardens. The Dowager didn't speak until they were out of earshot. Then she released Lena's arm and turned to face her. "What?" she said quietly. "Were you thinking?" Lena's throat burned. "She was baiting you. Of course she was baiting you." The Dowager's voice was sharp as a whip. "And you took the bait like a fool." "I'm not going to stand there and let her—" "Yes, you are." The Dowager stepped closer, her pale eyes boring into Lena's. "You will stand there, and you will smile, and you will let her say whatever vile thing she wants. Because the moment you fight back, the moment you show anger, you prove exactly what they think you are." "And what's that?" "Common." The word was a slap. "Beneath them. Unworthy of the position you've been given." Lena's vision blurred. "I didn't ask for this position." "But you accepted it." The Dowager's tone softened, just fractionally. "You chose to stay, Miss Varelli. That means you play by their rules, or you lose. There is no third option." "Then maybe I should lose." "Don't be dramatic." The Dowager turned toward the gardens, her hands clasped behind her back. "Losing means going home. It means watching your mother struggle while you wonder what might have been. It means letting Lady Verena win." She glanced back. "Is that what you want?" Lena's jaw clenched. "No?" "Then you need to be smarter." The Dowager resumed walking, and Lena fell into step beside her. "Verena is not your enemy because she dislikes you. She's your enemy because you threaten something she wants. If you want to survive her, you need to understand how she thinks." "How does she think?" "Like a chess player." The Dowager paused beside a stone bench. "Every move has a purpose. Every attack is calculated. She didn't ask about your father because she cared. She asked because she knew it would hurt." Lena swallowed hard. "It worked." "Only because you let it." The Dowager sat, gesturing for Lena to join her. "Pain is a weapon only if you reveal it. The moment she knows she's hurt you, she'll strike again, harder." "So I'm supposed to pretend nothing bothers me?" "You're supposed to control what they see." The Dowager's gaze was steady. "Emotion is fine in private, but in public you are stone, you are ice, you are impenetrable." Lena stared at her hands. "I don't know if I can do that." "You can." The Dowager's voice was unexpectedly gentle. "You've already done harder things. You walked into a world that wants you gone and chose to stay. That takes strength most people will never have. Or stupidity. Sometimes they're the same thing." A ghost of a smile crossed the Dowager's face. "But you're not stupid, Miss Varelli. Inexperienced, yes. Unprepared, certainly, but not stupid." Lena looked up. "Then teach me." The Dowager studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Very well." The lessons changed after that. Miss Clarence still drilled Lena on posture and etiquette, but the Dowager added something else. Strategy. She taught Lena to read a room, to identify allies and enemies, to recognize when someone was probing for weakness. She taught her how to deflect questions, how to turn insults into compliments, how to smile while imagining violence. "Power," the Dowager said one afternoon, "is not about strength. It's about control. Control of yourself, control of the narrative, control of how others perceive you." They were in the Dowager's sitting room, playing chess. Lena had never played before, but the Dowager insisted it was essential. Every piece has value, the Dowager continued, moving her knight. Even the pawns, especially the pawns, they're underestimated, overlooked, and that makes them dangerous. Lena studied the board. Is that what I am? A pawn? Right now, yes. The Dowager leaned back. But pawns can become queens if they reach the other side of the board. Lena moved her bishop, blocking the Dowager's knight. And what happens if they don't? They're sacrificed. The Dowager captured Lena's bishop with her rook, which is why you must be very, very careful. What? 2 weeks after the hunt, Lord Cameron returned to Thornwood. Lena hadn't seen him since the night in the study, and she'd hoped it would stay that way. But Alaric summoned her to his office late one evening, and when she arrived, Cameron was there. He looked older than she remembered, heavier. His face was flushed, his eyes bloodshot. "Miss Varelli," Alaric said, not looking up from the papers on his desk. "Lord Cameron has some questions for you." Lena's stomach dropped. "Questions?" Cameron stepped forward, his expression hostile. "I want to know what you heard that night, in the study." "I already told you, Ba." "You told me you heard nothing. I don't believe you." "That's not my problem." Cameron's face darkened. "You little—" "Enough." Alaric's voice was quiet, but it cut through the room like a blade. "Miss Varelli has answered your question. If you don't accept her answer, that's your issue, not hers." Your Grace, with all due respect, you've run out of respect." Alaric finally looked up, his pale eyes cold. "You've questioned her integrity, implied she's a spy, and now you're harassing her in my own home. I suggest you stop." Cameron's jaw worked. "The shipment was stolen, Alaric. Someone leaked information. If not her, then who?" "I don't know, but I know it wasn't her." Alaric stood, moving around the desk. "You're looking for an easy answer because you failed to secure your own operations. Don't make Miss Varelli your scapegoat." For a moment, Lena thought Cameron might argue. His fists clenched, his breathing harsh. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the door behind him. Lena exhaled shakily. "Are you all right?" Alaric asked. "I'm fine." She wasn't, but she said it anyway. What shipment was he talking about? "Nothing you need to worry about." "If it involves me, I need to worry about it." Alaric considered her for a long moment. Then he sighed and gestured to the chair across from his desk. Lena sat. 3 months ago, he began, I contracted with Lord Cameron to transport goods from the southern ports to the capital. Textiles, spices, luxury items. Legitimate trade. But the shipment was intercepted 2 weeks ago. Everything was stolen. Cameron lost a fortune. Alaric's expression was grim. He thinks someone with inside knowledge tipped off the thieves, and he thinks it was me. He thinks it was someone in this house. You're just the easiest target. Lena's hands tightened in her lap. So what happens now? Now I find out who actually did it. Alaric leaned back in his chair. And I make sure they pay. The coldness in his voice sent a shiver down Lena's spine. The answer came 3 days later, in the worst possible way. Lena was in the library, reading, or pretending to read, when the Dowager found her. "Come with me," the Dowager said, her voice tight. "What's wrong?" "Everything." They walked quickly through the corridors, the Dowager's face set in stone. She led Lena to the study, the same study where this whole nightmare had started, and pushed open the door. Inside, Alaric stood with Lord Cameron and 2 men Lena didn't recognize. On the desk between them sat a small leather journal. Alaric looked up as they entered. His expression was unreadable, but something in his eyes made Lena's blood run cold. "Miss Varelli," he said quietly, "where did you get this?" He held up the journal. Lena stared at it, confusion flooding through her. "I've never seen that before." "It was found in your room," Cameron said, his voice triumphant. "Hidden under your mattress." "What?" Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. "That's impossible. It contains shipping routes, cargo manifests, everything the thieves would need to intercept my shipment." Cameron's smile was vicious. "Still think she's innocent, Alaric?" Lena looked at Alaric, panic rising in her throat. "I didn't do this. Someone planted it. I swear." She swears, Cameron sneered. How touching. Silence. The dowager's voice cracked like a whip. She moved to the desk, picking up the journal with careful fingers. She examined it, flipping through pages, her expression growing darker. Then she looked at Lena. This is Lady Verena's handwriting. The room went still. Cameron blinked. What? This journal. The dowager held it up. The entries are written in Lady Verena's hand. I'd recognize it anywhere. Alaric took the journal from her, studying it closely. His jaw tightened. She's right. Cameron's face went white. But it was found in the girl's room, which means it was planted there. Alaric's voice was ice. The question is why? Lena's mind raced. Verena. Of course it was Verena. She'd been trying to destroy Lena from the start, but this was more than social warfare. This was an attempt to frame her for theft, maybe even treason. Where is Lady Verena now? The dowager asked. One of the men Lena didn't recognize stepped forward. She left the estate this morning, Your Grace. Said she was visiting family in the capital. How convenient. Alaric handed the journal to the man. Send riders. Bring her back. Your Grace, Cameron started. No. Alaric turned to him, and the fury in his eyes was terrifying. You wanted answers. You're going to get them. And when Lady Verena explains why her handwriting is in a journal implicating Miss Varelli in your stolen shipment, we'll all learn something interesting. Cameron opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked between Alaric and the journal, his confidence crumbling. I need to think about this. You do that. Alaric's tone was dismissive. Somewhere else. Cameron left without another word. The room fell silent. Lena stood frozen, her mind still trying to process what had just happened. She'd been accused, nearly condemned, and then saved by something as simple as handwriting. Lena. She looked up. Alaric was watching her, his expression softer than she'd ever seen it. I'm sorry, he said quietly. The apology hit her harder than any accusation could have. She nodded, not trusting her voice. The dowager placed a hand on her shoulder. You should rest. I can't. Lena's voice came out rough. Not until Verena comes back. Not until this is finished. It won't be finished for days, the dowager said. If she even comes back at all. Lena met her eyes. Then we make sure she does. And for the first time since she'd arrived at Thornwood, she saw something in the dowager's face that looked almost like pride. Lady Verena didn't come back. The riders returned 4 days later, empty-handed. She'd vanished, not fled in panic, but disappeared with the calculated precision of someone who'd planned their exit long before the trap was sprung. Her family claimed ignorance. The townhouse in the capital was locked, the servants dismissed, her belongings removed with such thoroughness it was as if she'd never existed at all. Lena stood in the dowager's sitting room, watching through the window as the riders reported their failure to Alaric in the courtyard below. Even from this distance, she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his jaw locked when the lead rider shook his head. She's not coming back, Lena said quietly. No. The dowager sat in her usual chair, hands folded in her lap. She's not. So what happens now? Now we adapt. The dowager's tone was matter-of-fact, as if they were discussing dinner arrangements rather than the collapse of justice. Verena's flight is as good as a confession. Society will draw its own conclusions. Will they? Lena turned from the window. Or will they find a way to blame me anyway? The dowager's silence was answer enough. Lena sank onto the settee, exhaustion pulling at her bones. She'd barely slept since the journal was found. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Cameron's triumphant sneer, felt the weight of accusation pressing down on her chest. The fear hadn't left. It had just changed shape, morphing into something harder to name. You should eat, the dowager said. I'm not hungry. That wasn't a suggestion. Lena looked up, meeting those pale gray eyes that saw too much. Does it ever get easier, living like this? No. The dowager's expression softened, just fractionally. You just get better at carrying it. A knock interrupted them. Miss Clarence entered, her face pinched with worry. Your Grace, Lord Hastings is asking for Miss Varelli. He's waiting in the drawing room. Lena's stomach clenched. Philip Hastings, Alaric's old school friend, the one who'd cornered her at the hunt with his probing questions and false charm. Tell him she's indisposed, the Dowager said. I already did. He insists it's urgent. The Dowager and Lena exchanged glances. I'll go, Lena said, standing. Better to face it than let him spread rumors about why I'm hiding. You're not going alone. The Dowager rose. If Philip wants to play games, he can play them with both of us. Philip was pacing when they entered, his hands clasped behind his back. He turned at the sound of the door, his expression somewhere between concern and calculation. Miss Virelli. He bowed slightly. Your Grace, thank you for seeing me. We haven't much time, the Dowager said, settling into a chair with the air of someone granting an audience. What do you want, Philip? He hesitated, then pulled a folded letter from his coat. This arrived for me this morning, from Lady Verena. Lena's blood went cold. The Dowager extended her hand. Let me see it. Philip handed it over. The Dowager read in silence, her expression darkening with each line. When she finished, she looked at Lena. It seems Lady Verena is making her case from a distance. What does it say? Lena asked. The Dowager handed her the letter. Lena read, her hands trembling. Dearest Philip, by now you've heard the lies being spread about me. I write to you as a friend, knowing you value truth over politics. Miss Virelli is not what she seems. She inserted herself into the Duke's life through manipulation and deceit, and when I attempted to expose her, she conspired with the Dowager to frame me for crimes I did not commit. The journal was mine, yes, but it contained only notes from a novel I was writing, nothing more. They twisted innocent words into evidence to protect their precious pawn. I've left Thornwood because I refuse to be destroyed by a common girl and her aristocratic protectors. But I will not be silent. The truth will come out, and when it does, you'll see what I've seen all along, that Lena Virelli is a cancer in noble society, and the Duke's protection of her is a scandal that will ruin us all. Yours in friendship and truth. Verena Lena lowered the letter, her stomach churning. She's insane. She's strategic, the Dowager corrected. This letter is designed to plant doubt, to make people question our version of events. And she sent it to Philip specifically because he has influence among the younger lords. Philip shifted uncomfortably. I didn't come here to take sides. I came to warn you. If Verena sent this to me, she sent similar letters to others. By tomorrow, half the estate will be questioning what really happened. Then we tell them the truth, Lena said. The truth? Philip's laugh was bitter. The truth is complicated. Verena's lie is simple. Which do you think people will believe? Lena wanted to argue, to insist that evidence mattered, that facts would prevail. But she'd learned enough about this world to know better. What do you suggest? The Dowager asked Philip. I suggest damage control. Make a statement. Explain the situation before Verena's version takes root. He paused. And perhaps Miss Virelli should consider leaving Thornwood, for her own safety. Absolutely not, the Dowager said. Your Grace, with respect, we will not reward Verena's cowardice by exiling an innocent woman. The Dowager stood, signaling the end of the conversation. Thank you for the warning, Philip, but Miss Virelli stays. Philip looked like he wanted to argue. Instead, he bowed and left. The door closed behind him, and Lena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. He's right, you know, she said quietly. Leaving would be easier. Easier is not the same as right. The Dowager moved to the window, gazing out at the grounds. If you leave now, Verena wins. She'll have proven that money and connections can drive out truth. Is that the world you want to live in? I already live in that world. Then change it. Lena stared at her. How? The Dowager turned, and for the first time, Lena saw something fierce burning behind those cool gray eyes. By refusing to disappear. That night, Alaric summoned her to his study. Lena went with reluctance, exhaustion making her steps heavy. She found him at his desk, papers spread before him, a glass of whiskey untouched at his elbow. He looked up when she entered, and the weariness in his face mirrored her own. Close the door, he said. She did. I heard about Verena's letter, he continued. Philip showed it to half the drawing room before he had the decency to bring it to my grandmother. Of course he did. He's not malicious, just weak. Alaric pushed the papers aside. But weak men are dangerous in their own way. They bend to pressure, and right now, the pressure is building. Lena crossed her arms. So, what are you going to do? I've already done it. He stood, moving to the window. I've sent my own letters to every guest currently at Thornwood and every major house in the region, making it clear that Lady Verena is a fugitive from justice, that the evidence against her is irrefutable, and that anyone who spreads her lies will answer to me personally. Will it work? For some. He turned to face her. Others will believe what they want to believe. And you? What do you believe? The question hung between them. Alaric studied her for a long moment. I believe you've been caught in a war you didn't start and don't deserve. I believe my protection has made you a target. And I believe... He paused. I believe I've made things worse for you, not better. Lena's throat tightened. She'd expected many things from him. Cold calculation, strategic reassurance, even indifference. But not this. Not guilt. You saved me, she said quietly. That night in the study, you could have let Cameron destroy me. You didn't. I saved myself, he corrected. You were just convenient. I don't believe that anymore. His eyes narrowed. Why not? Because convenient doesn't require this much effort. She gestured at the letters on his desk. Convenient doesn't mean threatening your allies or risking your reputation. You could have cut me loose the moment things got complicated, but you didn't. Alaric's jaw tightened. Don't mistake pragmatism for compassion. I'm not. Lena stepped closer. I'm just saying that maybe your reasons for protecting me have changed, even if you won't admit it. For a moment, she thought he might argue. Instead, he looked away, his expression shuddering closed. You should go, he said. It's late. Lena hesitated, then nodded and turned toward the door. Lena. She stopped, her hand on the doorknob. Be careful, he said quietly. Verena's not the only enemy you have here. I know. No, you don't. His voice was strained. There are people in this house who would hurt you just to hurt me, and I can't protect you from all of them. Lena looked back at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the shadows under his eyes. He looked like a man carrying weight no one else could see. Then teach me to protect myself, she said. The breaking point came 3 days later in the form of a rider from the capital. Lena was in the gardens with Miss Clarence, practicing her posture, walking with books balanced on her head, a ridiculous exercise that nonetheless worked, when she heard shouting from the main house. She dropped the books and ran, Miss Clarence calling after her. By the time she reached the entrance hall, a crowd had gathered. Alaric stood at the center, a letter in his hand, his face carved from stone. The dowager was beside him, her expression unreadable. Lena pushed through the crowd. What's happened? Alaric looked up, and the devastation in his eyes made her stomach drop. It's your mother, he said quietly. The world tilted. What about her? She's been arrested. Lena's ears rang. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense. What? Why? Debt. Alaric's voice was flat. Your father apparently owed money to a merchant consortium before he died. They've been waiting for the debt to mature and now they're calling it in. Your mother can't pay. How much? Lena's voice cracked. 1,200 sovereigns. The number was incomprehensible, more than her mother would earn in 5 lifetimes. That's impossible. My father never borrowed that kind of money. The contract has his signature. Alaric handed her the letter. I've seen it. It's legitimate. Lena scanned the letter, her vision blurring. Arrested. Debtor's prison. Seizure of assets. Her mother's name in cold official language that turned a person into a problem to be solved. This is Verena, Lena whispered. It has to be. She's doing this to punish me. The dowager's expression confirmed it before she spoke. The merchant consortium is owned by Verena's uncle. Lena's hand shook so hard the letter fluttered to the floor. I'll go, she said. I'll leave Thornwood, publicly renounce any connection to you, anything. Just make them release her. It won't work. Alaric's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Verena doesn't want your absence. She wants your destruction. Then what do I do? Lena's voice broke on the last word. Alaric and the dowager exchanged a glance. There is one option, the dowager said carefully, but you won't like it. I don't care, tell me. The debt can be paid. I have the funds. Lena blinked. Then pay it. It's not that simple. The dowager's expression was grave. If I pay your mother's debt, it becomes public knowledge. Everyone will know that you're financially dependent on us. It will confirm every suspicion Verena has planted, that you're here for money, for status, for anything but legitimate friendship. I don't care what they think. You should. Alaric's tone was hard. Because once that narrative solidifies, it never goes away. You'll be branded a fortune hunter, a social climber, someone who used tragedy to manipulate her way into noble circles. It will follow you for the rest of your life. Lena stared at them both, disbelief warring with desperation. You're saying I have to choose between my mother's freedom and my reputation? I'm saying there are consequences to every choice. Alaric's eyes were sad. And sometimes all the options are terrible. Lena's mind raced. Her mother locked in a debtor's prison. The woman who'd raised her alone, who'd worked until her fingers bled, who'd never asked for anything except that Lena survive. And now she was paying the price for Lena's choices, for Lena's decision to stay at Thornwood, for Lena's refusal to disappear. Pay the debt, Lena said. Lena, the dowager started. I said pay it. Her voice was steel. I don't care what they call me. I don't care what they think. My mother doesn't deserve to suffer because I made enemies. Alaric studied her face. Then he nodded. It will be done. Thank you. The words felt inadequate, but they were all she had. She turned and walked away before either of them could see her cry. The rumors started within hours. By evening, the entire estate knew that the Dowager Duchess had paid off a massive debt belonging to Lena's family. The whispers followed her through corridors, trailed her into rooms, wrapped around her like chains. Gold digger, opportunist, manipulator. Lena heard them all. She kept her head high, her expression blank, just as the Dowager had taught her. But inside, she was breaking. She retreated to her room as soon as dinner ended, unable to bear another pitying look or veiled insult. She pressed her back against the door and slid to the floor, her careful composure finally cracking. Her mother was safe. That was what mattered. Nothing else could matter. But it did, because she'd just confirmed every terrible thing Verena had said about her. She'd proven that she was here for money, for security, for the protection only wealth could provide, and no amount of truth could undo that perception. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Go away, Lena called. The door opened anyway. Alaric stood in the hallway, his expression unreadable. I said, I heard what you said. He stepped inside and closed the door. I'm not leaving. Lena wiped her eyes roughly. What do you want? To tell you you're not alone. The words hit harder than any insult could have. Lena laughed, bitter and broken. I am alone. That's the whole point. I'm a seamstress's daughter playing dress-up in a world that hates me, and now everyone knows it. They knew it before. Alaric crossed the room, sinking down beside her on the floor. The casual intimacy of it startled her. You were always an outsider, Lena. Paying the debt didn't change that. It made it real. It made it visible. He leaned his head back against the door. There's a difference. They sat in silence for a moment. Lena studied his profile, the sharp line of his jaw, the faint scar at his temple, the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. Why are you here? She asked quietly. Because you shouldn't be alone right now. You don't owe me comfort. Maybe not. He turned to look at her. But I'm giving it anyway. Something in his tone made her chest ache. She wanted to ask what had changed, when his cold calculation had softened into something that looked almost like caring. But the question felt too big, too dangerous. Instead, she said, I need to leave Thornwood. Alaric went still. What? My mother is safe now. The debt is paid. There's no reason for me to stay. Lena forced herself to meet his eyes. Every day I'm here, I make things worse. For you, for your grandmother, for everyone. Verena wins if I leave, but she's already won. I just need to accept it. No. It's not your decision. The hell it isn't. Alaric's voice was low, fierce. You think I paid that debt so you could run away? You think my grandmother has spent weeks training you so you could surrender the moment things got hard. This isn't hard. It's impossible. Nothing is impossible. He grabbed her hand, his grip warm and solid. You've survived this long. You've learned, adapted, fought. You've become someone even my grandmother respects. And she respects almost no one. You don't get to throw that away because you're scared. I'm not scared, Lena said, even though it was a lie. Yes, you are. And that's fine. Fear is smart. His eyes searched hers. But don't let it make you small. Lena's throat burned. What if I'm not strong enough? You are. His certainty was absolute. You're the strongest person I've met. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Lena looked down at their joined hands. She should pull away. This was too close, too intimate, too dangerous. But she couldn't make herself let go. Alaric, she whispered. What are we doing? He was quiet for a long moment. Then very gently, he lifted her chin with his free hand, forcing her to look at him. I don't know, he said honestly, but I know I don't want you to leave. Her heart stuttered. Why not? Because somewhere between protecting you and fighting for you, I started... He stopped, jaw tightening. I started caring whether you stayed. The admission hung in the air like a confession. Lena's breath caught. She could see the truth of it in his eyes, the vulnerability he'd been hiding behind cold pragmatism, the fear that she'd reject what he was offering. I care too, she whispered. Something in his expression broke open. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then deeper, and Lana felt the world narrow to this moment, this connection, this impossible thing growing between them. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Alaric rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he said quietly. Please. Lena closed her eyes, her decision already made. I'll stay. Dawn. The messenger arrived at dawn. Lena was in the dowager's sitting room, sharing an early breakfast, when the butler entered with a sealed letter. For Miss Varelli, he said, his expression grave. From the capital. Lena's stomach dropped. She broke the seal with trembling fingers and read. The letter slipped from her hands. What is it? The dowager asked sharply. Lena couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. The dowager picked up the letter and read, her face going ashen. It was from her mother. My dearest Lena, the debt has been paid and I am free. But freedom comes with a cost I did not anticipate. The merchant consortium, the one that held the debt, has made me an offer. They will forgive the debt entirely, erase it from record, if I do one thing. Testify that you coerced the Duke into paying it through manipulation and deceit. They've given me 3 days to decide. If I refuse, the debt returns with interest I can never pay. If I accept, they promise security for both of us. A home, an income, safety. I don't know what to do. I don't know what you've become caught up in, but I know my daughter. I know you would never manipulate anyone. But I also know that nobility doesn't play fair, and I'm terrified of what they'll do to you if I refuse. Please, if there's any way out of this, find it. I can't lose you, but I can't condemn you either. Your mother Lena felt like she'd been gutted. It's Verena, she said numbly. She's using my mother against me. The dowager's hands clenched around the letter. This is extortion. This is war. Lena stood, her mind clearing with terrible clarity. And I'm done being a casualty. She walked to the door. Where are you going? The dowager demanded. Lena looked back, and for the first time since arriving at Thornwood, she felt no fear. To end this. She found Alaric in the stables, preparing to ride out. He turned when he heard her approach, taking one look at her face and dropping the reins. What happened? She handed him the letter. He read it, his expression darkening with every line. When he finished, he crumpled it in his fist. I'll send riders to the capital immediately. No. Lena's voice was calm. No more riders. No more letters. I'm going myself. Absolutely not. This is my fight, Alaric. She met his eyes. Verena is using my mother as bait because she knows I'll come. So I will. But on my terms. It's a trap. I know. She smiled, hard and cold. That's why you're coming with me. Alaric stared at her. Then, slowly, something like admiration crossed his face. When do we leave? Now. They rode hard for the capital, taking only 2 guards and leaving before the Dowager could organize a full escort. The journey took 3 days. 3 days of driving rain and muddy roads, and Lena's mind spinning through every possible outcome. She'd left Thornwood with nothing but the clothes on her back and a single goal: save her mother, destroy Verena, and prove once and for all that she wasn't some helpless pawn. The capital rose before them on the 3rd evening, a sprawling city of stone and smoke, wealth and poverty crammed together in a chaos that made Lena's head spin. They went straight to the Merchant Consortium's office, a grim building in the financial district. Inside, Verena was waiting. She sat behind a massive oak desk, looking every inch the aristocrat despite her exile from Thornwood. Her auburn hair was perfectly arranged, her emerald dress spotless, her smile victorious. "Miss Varelli," she said pleasantly, "how kind of you to come." Lena stepped forward, ignoring Alaric's warning hand on her arm. "Let my mother go. I will, as soon as she gives her testimony." "She's not testifying to lies." Verena's smile widened. "Then I suppose the debt stands." "The debt is paid." "The debt is forgiven," Verena corrected. "There's a difference. Forgiveness can be revoked." Lena's hands clenched. "What do you want, Verena? Really want? Because this isn't about money or debts or any of that. This is about you being humiliated." Verena's expression flickered. "Careful. You tried to destroy me and failed. You ran away like a coward, and now you're hiding behind legal contracts because you know you can't touch me any other way." Lena leaned forward. "You're pathetic." "I'm powerful." Verena stood, her composure cracking. "I have your mother. I have connections. I have everything I need to ruin you." "Then do it." Lena's voice was deadly calm. "Ruin me. Spread your lies. Forge your testimonies. But know this: every move you make against me, I will match. Every lie you tell, I will expose. You want a war? You've got one." Verena's face twisted with rage. "You stupid girl! You think you can fight me? I will destroy everything you love." "You already did." Lena's voice broke on the words. "You took my safety, my reputation, my peace. You've done everything you can to make me disappear. And I'm still here." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Verena's eyes. Alaric stepped forward, his voice like ice. "Release her mother, now, or I will personally ensure that every merchant house in this city knows you're using coercion and forgery to settle personal grudges. Your uncle's business will be ruined by morning." Verena's jaw worked. "You wouldn't dare." "Try me." The standoff stretched for an agonizing moment. Then Verena laughed, sharp and bitter. "Fine, take her. Take the debt. Take everything." She pulled a contract from her desk and tore it in half. "You win, Miss Varelli. Congratulations." But her eyes promised this wasn't over. Lena took the torn contract and walked out, Alaric beside her. Her mother was waiting in a side room, thin and exhausted but alive. When she saw Lena, she burst into tears. They held each other for a long time, neither speaking, both shaking with relief. Finally, her mother pulled back. "We need to leave. Now. Before she changes her mind." "We will." Lena wiped her eyes. "But first, there's something I need to do." She turned to Alaric. He was watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "I need to go home," she said quietly. "Take my mother somewhere safe. Somewhere Verena can't reach." Understanding and pain flashed across his face. "I know. This isn't—" Lena's throat closed. "This isn't because I don't care. I know that too." He stepped closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "But you're leaving anyway." "I have to." Tears burned her eyes. "Every day I'm near you, I put you in danger. I'm a target, Alaric, and as long as I'm by your side, you are too." "I don't care." "I do." She grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. "I care about you too much to let you burn for me." Alaric's jaw clenched. "So that's it? You're just going to disappear?" "I'm going to survive." She forced a smile. "You taught me that." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms, holding her so tightly she could barely breathe. "This isn't over," he said against her hair. "Yes, It is. No. He pulled back, his eyes fierce. It's not. I will find you, Lena, and when I do, we're finishing this conversation. Before she could respond, he kissed her, hard, desperate, full of everything they couldn't say. Then he let her go and walked away. Lena watched him leave, her heart shattering into pieces. Her mother touched her arm gently. Who was that? Lena wiped her eyes. Someone I can't keep. They left the capital that night, slipping away under cover of darkness. Lena didn't look back. She couldn't. But 3 days later, when they reached the small coastal town where her mother had relatives, Lena received a message. It was from Alaric. Just 3 words, written in his sharp, precise handwriting. I'm coming. Lena stared at the message, her hands shaking. And despite everything, despite the impossibility, the danger, the insurmountable gap between their worlds, she felt something she hadn't felt in weeks. Hope was a dangerous thing. Lena folded Alaric's message and tucked it into her pocket, her fingers trembling. I'm coming. 2 words that changed everything and nothing. He could be coming to say goodbye properly. He could be coming to convince her to return. He could be coming because he didn't know how to let go any more than she did. Or he could be coming because he'd finally realized what she'd known all along, that whatever was growing between them was impossible, and the kindest thing would be to end it cleanly. She stood at the window of her mother's cousin's cottage, watching the gray sea crash against the rocks below. The coastal town of Greyport was small, isolated, the kind of place where strangers were noticed and gossip traveled faster than the wind. They'd been here 3 days, and already Lena felt the weight of curious stares every time she ventured into the market. The seamstress's daughter, who'd run off to play noble. That's what they whispered. She'd heard it twice yesterday, once from a fishmonger's wife, who didn't bother lowering her voice. Lena. Her mother's voice pulled her from the window. Maris stood in the doorway, looking better than she had in the capital, but still too thin, still carrying shadows under her eyes that spoke of sleepless nights in debtor's prison. You need to eat something, Maris said. I'm not hungry. You haven't been hungry in 3 days. Her mother crossed the small room, settling into the chair by the fireplace. Is it the Duke? Lena's throat tightened. I don't want to talk about him. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. Lena turned from the window. He's from one world. I'm from another. That's all there is to it. Is it? Maris studied her daughter with eyes that had seen too much and understood more. Because the way you looked at him in the capital, that wasn't the look of someone from another world. That was the look of someone in love. The word hung between them like a challenge. Lena sank onto the edge of the bed. It doesn't matter what I feel. We can't. There's no future where this works. Why not? Because I'm nobody. The words burst out harder than she intended. I'm a seamstress's daughter with no money, no title, no connections. Even if he wanted me, which he doesn't, not really, his world would destroy us both. You saw what Lady Verana did, and she was just one person. Imagine what an entire society could do. Maris was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Your father was a laborer. I was a seamstress. Everyone said we were fools for marrying across trades, that it would never work, that we'd starve within a year. You almost did starve. But we didn't. Maris smiled sadly. We made it work because we loved each other, and we were both too stubborn to fail. When he died, I could have given up. Sold you to a wealthy family as a servant, taken the easy path. But I didn't because I knew my daughter was meant for more than survival. Mama, let me finish. Maris leaned forward. You've spent your whole life believing you don't deserve good things because you weren't born into them. But that Duke, Alaric, he doesn't see you that way. I watched him with you. He sees someone worth fighting for. He sees a problem to solve. No, Maris's voice was firm. He sees you, and that terrifies you more than any scandal ever could. The truth of it hit like a physical blow. Lena pressed her hands to her face, fighting back tears. What if I'm not enough? What if I try, and I fail, and I lose everything again? Then you'll have tried. Her mother's hand was warm on her shoulder. And that's more than most people ever do. A knock at the door interrupted them. Lena's heart jumped. Too soon. It was too soon for Alaric to have arrived. But when Maris opened the door, it wasn't Alaric standing there. It was the Dowager Duchess. Lena shot to her feet, shock rendering her speechless. The Dowager looked out of place in the small cottage, her elegant black dress and silver hair, too fine for the rough-hewn walls and simple furniture. But her expression was as composed as ever, as if she made a habit of appearing unannounced in coastal villages. "Your Grace," Maris said, recovering faster than Lena. "We weren't expecting—" "Of course you weren't." The Dowager stepped inside, her sharp eyes taking in the modest space in a single sweep. "May I sit?" Maris gestured to the chair she'd just vacated. The Dowager sat with the same perfect posture she maintained everywhere, folding her hands in her lap. "Miss Varelli," she said, looking directly at Lena. "We need to talk." Lena found her voice. "How did you even know where we were?" "I have resources." The Dowager's tone suggested the question was beneath her. "The better question is why you ran." "I didn't run. I left to protect—" "You ran." The interruption was gentle, but firm. "And I understand why. But running doesn't solve anything. It just postpones the inevitable." "The inevitable being what?" Lena crossed her arms. "Another scandal? Another attempt to destroy me?" "The inevitable being a choice." The Dowager's gaze was steady. "You can hide here, safe and small, for the rest of your life. Or you can come back and fight for what you want." "I don't want anything from that world." "Liar." The word was soft but sharp as a blade. "You want my grandson, and unless I'm very much mistaken, he wants you too." Lena's face burned. We're not. Please don't insult my intelligence." The Dowager's expression was almost amused. "I've watched you two dance around each other for weeks. The tension was obvious to everyone except apparently the two of you." Maris made a small sound that might have been a laugh. Lena glared at her mother, then turned back to the Dowager. "Even if that were true, it doesn't matter. We're from different worlds. It would never work." "Why not?" "Because—" Lena gestured helplessly. "Because society would never accept it. Because I'd always be the commoner who trapped a duke. Because every day would be a battle, and eventually we'd lose." "You're right." The Dowager's bluntness was startling. "Society won't accept it easily. People will talk. There will be battles." She paused. "But you've already been fighting, Miss Varelli, and you've won more than you realize." "I haven't won anything. I ran away." "You survived." The Dowager leaned forward slightly. "You survived Lady Verena's schemes, Lord Cameron's suspicion, and the judgment of an entire aristocratic class. You learned their rules, played their games, and emerged with your dignity intact. That's not running. That's strategy." Lena shook her head. "It's not enough." "Then make it enough." The Dowager's voice hardened. "You want to know what I see when I look at you? I see a girl who walked into a world designed to crush her and refused to be crushed. I see someone who protected her mother at the cost of her own reputation. I see someone my grandson respects, which is rarer than you know. Respect isn't love. No, but it's a foundation." The Dowager stood. "Alaric is coming here, Miss Varelli. He left Thornwood 2 days ago, against my advice, to find you. He's risking his own reputation, his own standing, because he believes you're worth it. The question is, do you believe it?" Lena's chest felt too tight. "I don't know." "Then you have until he arrives to figure it out." The Dowager moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I didn't come all this way just to deliver a message. I came to tell you that if you choose to come back, if you choose to fight for this, you won't be fighting alone." She left before Lena could respond. Maris closed the door and turned to her daughter. "Well?" Lena sank onto the bed, her mind spinning. "I don't know what to do." "Yes, you do." Her mother's smile was knowing. "You're just afraid to do it." Alaric arrived the next morning, riding into Greyport with only one guard and looking like he'd slept in his clothes, which Lena realized when she saw him dismount in the village square. He probably had. She watched from the cottage window as he asked directions from a fisherman, as he looked around with the careful assessment of someone who'd never been anywhere this small or this simple. He looked out of place here, too fine, too polished, too much like what he was. A duke, and she was still just Lena. But she went downstairs anyway. He saw her the moment she stepped outside, and the relief that crossed his face was so naked it made her chest ache. He crossed the square in long strides, stopping just in front of her. "You left," he said. "I know," without saying goodbye. "I said goodbye." Her voice was quieter than she intended. "You just didn't want to hear it." Alaric's jaw tightened. "Because it was the wrong goodbye. There is no right goodbye for this." "Then don't say goodbye at all." He stepped closer, and she could smell the road on him, dust and sweat and desperation. "Come back to Thornwood." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because nothing has changed." The words came out louder than she meant. "The same people who wanted me gone before will want me gone now. Lady Verena is still out there, still plotting. And I'm still—" She gestured at herself, at the simple dress her mother had made, at the cottage behind her. "I'm still this. And I'm still me." Alaric's voice was rough. "Still the cold, heartless Duke who couldn't love his own wife. Still carrying the weight of a name that's been dragging me down since birth. We're both broken, Lena. That doesn't mean we can't fit together. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple." He grabbed her hands, his grip warm and steady. "I love you." Boop. The words hit her like a thunderclap. Lena stared at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. "What?" "I love you," he repeated, quieter this time. "I didn't plan to. I didn't want to. But somewhere between protecting you and fighting for you and watching you refuse to break, I fell in love with you. And I know it's inconvenient. I know it's complicated. But I'm done pretending it's not real." Tears burned Lena's eyes. "Alaric, you don't have to say it back." His voice cracked slightly. "You don't have to feel the same way, but you do have to stop running, because I will follow you, Lena, to every village, every corner of the kingdom, every place you try to hide. I will find you, and I will ask again, and I won't stop until you believe that you're worth fighting for." "I'm not worth this," she whispered. "That's not your decision." He cupped her face in his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You don't get to decide what you're worth to me. That's mine to decide. And I've decided you're worth everything." Lena's breath hitched. She wanted to argue, to list all the reasons this was impossible, to protect him from the disaster loving her would inevitably bring. But she was so tired of running. "I love you too," she said, the words spilling out before she could stop them. "I love you, and it terrifies me because everyone I've ever loved has been taken from me or hurt because of me, and I can't lose you too." "You won't." His forehead pressed against hers. "We're going to fight for this, Lena, together, and we're going to win." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've never wanted anything the way I want you." His voice was fierce. "And I don't lose." Despite everything, Lena laughed, wet and shaky but real. Alaric kissed her then, deep and desperate and full of promises neither of them knew if they could keep. But in that moment, with the sea crashing below and the whole impossible future stretching ahead, it felt like enough. When they finally pulled apart, Lena saw her mother watching from the cottage doorway, tears streaming down her face and a smile on her lips. "So what now?" Lena asked. Alaric's expression turned calculating. "Now we go back, and we do what we should have done from the beginning. Which is? Stop hiding what we are." His hand tightened on hers. "Stop playing by their rules, and make them accept us on our terms." They returned to Thornwood 3 days later, arriving not in secret but in broad daylight. Alaric rode at Lena's side, making no effort to hide her presence or pretend she was anything other than what she was, the woman he'd chosen. The estate erupted. Whispers spread through the grounds like wildfire. Servants stopped their work to stare. Guests emerged from the main house, their faces ranging from shock to scandal to barely concealed glee at the drama unfolding. The dowager met them in the entrance hall, her expression unreadable. "Welcome back," she said. Alaric dismounted and helped Lena down, keeping his hand on the small of her back, a gesture of possession that everyone could see. "Grandmother," he said calmly, "I need to speak with the household, all of them, in the main hall, now." The dowager's eyebrows rose slightly. "All of them?" "Everyone currently on the estate." His tone left no room for argument. Guests, servants, everyone. Very well. She turned to the butler. Make the arrangements. Within an hour, the main hall was packed. Lena stood beside Alaric at the front, her heart pounding so hard she thought everyone could hear it. Every eye in the room was on them, some curious, some hostile, some delighted by the spectacle. She recognized faces from the dinners and hunts. Lord Philip Hastings looking uncomfortable, various ladies whispering behind their fans, Lord Cameron standing near the back with his arms crossed. Alaric raised his hand, and the room fell silent. "Thank you for gathering," he began, his voice carrying easily through the space. "I have an announcement that concerns all of you, and I prefer to make it once rather than have rumors spread like disease through this house." Nervous laughter rippled through the crowd. Many of you have speculated about Miss Lena Varelli's presence at Thornwood. You've questioned her background, her motives, her right to be here. Alaric's gaze swept the room. Some of you have been cruel, others simply curious, but all of you have made assumptions based on incomplete information. He paused, and Lena felt his hand find hers, their fingers intertwining. "I'm here to give you complete information," he continued. "Miss Varelli is not a charity case, she's not a social experiment, and she's certainly not an opportunist trying to manipulate her way into noble society." "Then what is she?" someone called from the back. Alaric's expression was cold as winter. "She's the woman I intend to marry." The room exploded, gasps, shouts, a few delighted squeals from younger ladies who apparently found the drama romantic. Lena stood frozen, her ears ringing. Marriage. He'd said marriage. In front of everyone, making it real and public and impossible to take back. "You can't be serious," Lord Cameron's voice cut through the chaos. "Your Grace, she's a commoner. The scandal will be significant," Alaric agreed calmly. "I'm aware. I don't care. The family will adapt." The Dowager's voice rang out clear and strong. She moved to stand beside Alaric and Lena, her presence adding weight to the declaration. "Lord Cameron, perhaps you've forgotten that I myself came from merchant stock before marrying into this family. The Thorn line has survived far worse than an unconventional marriage." Lena stared at her. She'd never known that. The Dowager? Merchant stock? "This is madness," another voice called. "The girl is nobody." "The girl," Alaric interrupted, his voice dropping to something dangerous, "has more integrity in her smallest finger than most of you have in your entire bodies. She survived assassination attempts on her character, navigated a world designed to destroy her, and emerged stronger than when she started. If that doesn't qualify her for respect, then I question what does." Philip Hastings stepped forward. "Alaric, I say this as a friend. Think about what you're doing. Your reputation, your standing, are mine to risk." Alaric's gaze was steady. "I appreciate your concern, Philip, but my decision is made." "When?" another woman asked. "When did this happen?" "Gradually." Alaric looked at Lena, and the softness in his eyes made her chest ache. Then, all at once. More whispers, more shock, more judgment. But Lena also saw something else scattered through the crowd. A few smiles, some approving nods. Younger ladies looking at her with something that might have been admiration. "I understand that many of you will disapprove," Alaric said, addressing the room again. "Some of you will leave Thornwood in protest. Others will whisper about this for years. That's your choice. But understand this. Miss Varelli is under my protection. Anyone who harms her, spreads lies about her, or attempts to undermine her will answer to me personally, and I promise you that is not a conversation you want to have." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then, unexpectedly, someone started clapping. Lena turned to see a young woman near the front, Lady Caroline something, she couldn't remember the surname, applauding slowly. Another woman joined her, then another. Not everyone, not even most. But enough that the sound filled the hall, drowning out the whispers of disapproval. Alaric squeezed Lena's hand, and despite the fear, despite the uncertainty of what came next, Lena felt something unfamiliar blooming in her chest. Not hope, something stronger. Certainty. The exodus began that afternoon. 3 families packed their belongings and left without a word. Lord Cameron made a stiff, formal departure, citing urgent business in the capital. Others simply disappeared, their rooms emptied, their carriages rolling away in silence. but more stayed than Lena expected. Lady Caroline sought her out in the gardens that evening, her smile genuine. "That was the most exciting thing to happen at Thornwood in years," she said. "Thank you for that." Lena blinked. "You're thanking me?" "Half the people here are dying of boredom. You just gave them months of conversation." Caroline's eyes sparkled with mischief. "Besides, I rather like the idea of a commoner shaking up the old guard. They could use some shaking." She wasn't the only one. Over the next few days, Lena found herself approached by younger nobles, second sons and daughters, who had their own complicated relationships with aristocratic expectations. They were curious, friendly, some even admiring. "You did what most of us only dream about," one young lord told her. "You refused to play by the rules and won anyway." "I haven't won yet," Lena said. "Haven't you?" He gestured around the drawing room where they stood, where she was being included in conversations, where people were actually listening when she spoke. "Looks like winning to me." But the real victory came a week later, in the form of a letter. Lena was in the library when the Dowager found her, waving a sealed envelope. "This just arrived," the Dowager said, her expression carefully neutral. "From Lady Verena." Lena's stomach dropped. "What does she want now?" "Read it." Lena broke the seal with trembling fingers. "Miss Varelli, I write to you from exile, self-imposed, but exile nonetheless. I had intended to continue fighting, to continue undermining you until you broke, but it appears you're more resilient than I gave you credit for. News of your engagement to the Duke has spread through the capital like wildfire, and while many are shocked, scandalized, or disapproving, others are intrigued. They're calling you the common girl who captured a duke's heart. They're romanticizing your story, turning you into a symbol of something I never intended, hope for those born without titles. I find I have no appetite for fighting a symbol. I will not return to Thornwood. I will not continue my campaign against you. Consider this my surrender, though it pains me to write it. You've won, Miss Varelli. Not through manipulation or schemes, but through something I never possessed, genuine courage. I hope you and the Duke find whatever happiness this impossible match can provide. Lady Verena Ashford. Lena read the letter twice, hardly believing it. "She's giving up," she said. "So it seems." The Dowager took the letter, scanning it quickly. "Though I suspect it has more to do with pragmatism than generosity. Fighting you now would make her look petty." "I don't care why she's stopping, just that she is." The Dowager smiled. Wise girl. That night, Lena found Alaric in his study, buried in paperwork as usual. He looked up when she entered, his expression softening. "I got a letter from Verena," she said. His jaw tightened. "And?" "She's surrendering." She said. Lena's voice caught. "She said I won." Alaric stood, crossing to her in 3 strides. He pulled her into his arms, and Lena let herself sink into the embrace, feeling the tension of the last weeks finally starting to unravel. "You did win," he murmured against her hair. "You fought an entire system designed to destroy you, and you won." "We won," she corrected. "I couldn't have done this without you." "We make a good team." "We do." Lena pulled back to look at him. "So what happens now?" "Now?" Alaric's smile was slow and genuine, the first real smile she'd seen from him in days. "Now we start planning a wedding, and probably brace ourselves for a few more scandals along the way." "Sounds exhausting." "It will be." He kissed her forehead. "But I promise you, it will also be worth it." Lena believed him. For the first time since stumbling into that study all those weeks ago, she actually believed that maybe, just maybe, they could build something real out of this impossible situation. The seamstress's daughter and the cold Duke. It shouldn't work. But somehow, against all odds, it was starting to. The wedding was scheduled for spring, 3 months away, the Dowager declared, which would give them time to navigate the political minefield of announcing a duke's marriage to a commoner. Time for Lena to be properly introduced to society, not as a scandal, but as a future duchess. Time for the whispers to die down and the story to shift from shock to acceptance. Or so they hoped. Lena spent the first week after Alaric's announcement in a strange state of suspended reality. Part of her kept waiting for someone to burst through the door and declare the whole thing a mistake, a joke, Impossible. But the days passed, and the impossible remained stubbornly real. She was going to marry a duke. The thought made her dizzy. "Stop fidgeting," Miss Clarence said, adjusting the fabric draped over Lena's shoulders. They were in one of Thornwood's sitting rooms, surrounded by bolts of silk and lace and more clothing options than Lena had seen in her entire life. "The dressmaker can't work if you keep moving." "Sorry." Lena forced herself to stand still as the dressmaker, a stern woman named Madame Rousseau, circled her like a hawk, taking measurements and muttering in French. The dowager sat nearby, observing the process with the focus of a general planning a military campaign. "The wedding dress must be perfect," she said. "Not too opulent. We don't want to appear as though we're trying to disguise your background. But not too simple either. We need to show that you belong." "What if I don't want to belong?" Lena asked before she could stop herself. The dowager's eyebrow arched. "Explain." Lena chose her words carefully. "I spent weeks learning to act like one of you, to walk right, talk right, hold a teacup like my life depended on it. And maybe it did back then, but now—" She looked down at the silk pooling around her feet. "Now I'm wondering if belonging means losing who I was." Miss Clarence and Madame Rousseau exchanged glances. The dowager was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and crossed to Lena, placing both hands on her shoulders. "Let me tell you something I learned when I married into this family," she said quietly. "Belonging doesn't mean erasing yourself. It means making space for yourself in a world that wasn't built for you. You'll always be a seamstress's daughter, Lena. That's not something to hide, it's your foundation. But everyone expects you to fail." The dowager's grip tightened slightly. "So prove them wrong by succeeding on your terms, not theirs." Lena met her eyes, seeing understanding there, the understanding of someone who'd walked a similar path decades before. "How did you do it?" Lena asked. "When you married in?" A ghost of a smile crossed the dowager's face. "Badly, at first. I tried to be what they wanted, demure, agreeable, invisible. It made me miserable. Then my husband told me he'd married me for my mind, not my manners, and if I wanted to survive in his world, I needed to use it." She released Lena's shoulders. "So I did. I stopped apologizing for where I came from and started using it as an advantage. I knew things they didn't, how money actually worked, how trade functioned, how ordinary people thought. I made myself indispensable." "And they accepted you?" "Some did, some never did." The dowager returned to her chair. "But I stopped caring whether they accepted me and started caring whether they respected me. There's a difference." Madame Rousseau cleared her throat. "Your Grace, if we could return to the measurements—" "Of course," the dowager gestured. "Continue." But Lena's mind was already spinning with possibilities. The real test came 2 weeks later when Alaric announced they would be attending the winter assembly in the capital. It was the social event of the season. Every major noble house would be there, including many who'd left Thornwood in protest of Alaric's engagement announcement. It would be Lena's first public appearance as his acknowledged future bride, and everyone knew it would be a battlefield. "Are you sure about this?" Lena asked the night before they were set to leave. They were in the library, Alaric reviewing correspondence while Lena pretended to read. He looked up. "Having second thoughts?" "About marrying you?" "No." She set down her book. "About walking into a room full of people who hate me?" "Yes. They don't all hate you." "Enough of them do." Lena stood, pacing to the window. "What if this is a mistake? What if showing up just gives them ammunition?" Alaric set down his pen and crossed to her. "Then we give them ammunition and dare them to use it." "That's not reassuring." "It's not meant to be reassuring. It's meant to be true." He turned her to face him. "Lena, if we hide, if we skulk around avoiding society, we confirm everything they think about us, that we're ashamed, that we know this is wrong. But if we show up, head high, together, we tell them we have nothing to apologize for. Even if we don't believe it yet? Especially then." His smile was wry. "Fake it until it's real." "Isn't that what you've been doing since you got here?" "That's different." "It's exactly the same." He pulled her closer. "You've already survived the worst they could throw at you. This is just one more battle." Lena wanted to argue, to list all the ways this could go wrong. But looking at Alaric, at the certainty in his eyes, the steadiness of his presence, she felt some of her fear ease. "Okay," she said. "We'll go." "We'll go," he agreed. "And we'll make them remember why they should never have underestimated you." The winter assembly was held in the grand hall of the royal palace, a massive structure of marble and gold that made Thornwood look modest by comparison. Lena stood in the entrance, her hand tucked into the crook of Alaric's arm, and felt like she was about to step into the lion's den. "Breathe," Alaric murmured. "I am breathing." "You're holding your breath." Lena forced air into her lungs. The dowager had dressed her carefully for this. A gown of deep sapphire silk that brought out her eyes, her dark hair swept up in an elegant twist, jewelry that was expensive enough to show she belonged, but not so opulent as to look like she was trying too hard. She looked the part. Now she just had to play it. They entered together, and the reaction was immediate. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Heads turned. The whispers started before they'd taken 3 steps. "Ignore them," Alaric said quietly. Easier said than done, but Lena kept her chin up, her expression calm, just as the dowager had taught her. They moved through the crowd, Alaric introducing her to various nobles with the same casual confidence he'd used to discuss the weather. Some were polite, some were cold, a few were openly hostile. And then they encountered the Duke of Ashmont. He was an older man, gray-haired and stern-faced, with the kind of presence that made people step aside without thinking. He'd been talking with a cluster of other nobles when Alaric approached, but he stopped mid-sentence when he saw them. "Thorn," he said, his tone carefully neutral. "Ashmont." Alaric's voice was equally measured. "Allow me to introduce my fiancée, Miss Lena Varelli." Lena curtsied, her heart pounding. Ashmont looked her over with the thoroughness of a man inspecting livestock. "I've heard much about you, Miss Varelli." "I'm sure you have, Your Grace." "Most of it not flattering." Lena felt Alaric stiffen beside her, but she kept her expression pleasant. "I'm sure that's true as well." "And yet here you are," Ashmont's eyes narrowed, "marrying a duke. Quite the accomplishment for a seamstress's daughter." The words were designed to wound, to put her in her place. Lena felt the familiar anger rising, the same anger that had gotten her in trouble with Verena, the same anger she'd been taught to swallow. But then she remembered the dowager's words. "Use it as an advantage." "It is an accomplishment," Lena said calmly. "Though I'd argue the greater accomplishment is that His Grace chose me despite having his pick of noble ladies. It suggests he values substance over status." A few gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. Ashmont's expression darkened. "Are you implying noble ladies lack substance?" "Not at all." Lena's smile was polite but sharp. "I'm simply noting that His Grace looked beyond the usual pool and found someone who challenges him. I think that's admirable, not scandalous." Alaric's hand tightened on her arm. Whether in warning or support, she wasn't sure. Ashmont stared at her for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed. "Well," he said, "at least you have spirit." "That's more than I can say for most of the vapid creatures paraded through these assemblies." He glanced at Alaric. "You've chosen an interesting one, Thorn." "I'm aware." "I hope you know what you're doing." "I do." Ashmont nodded slowly, then turned back to his conversation, effectively dismissing them. As they walked away, Lena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That went better than expected," Alaric murmured. "He insulted me." "And you insulted him back, politely." Alaric's smile was genuine. "That's how you earn respect here, not by backing down, but by holding your ground without losing your composure." "I wanted to throw my drink at him." "I know, but you didn't. That's what matters." Over the next hour, similar encounters played out again and again. Some nobles sneered, others tested her with barbed comments disguised as compliments. A few were genuinely curious, asking questions about her background with what seemed like honest interest rather than judgment. And through it all, Lena held her ground. She was halfway through a conversation with Lady Caroline, who'd sought her out specifically to express support, when a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Lena turned, her stomach sinking. Lady Verena Ashford had just entered the hall. The crowd parted like water as Verena swept through, dressed in crimson silk that made her look like a flame. She moved with the confidence of someone who knew she was causing a scene and didn't care. Lena's first instinct was to hide, to retreat, to avoid the confrontation. But Alaric's hand on her back kept her steady. "She can't hurt you here," he said quietly, "not with everyone watching." Verena saw them and changed direction, moving toward them with deliberate purpose. The crowd fell silent, sensing drama. "Miss Varelli," Verena said, her voice carrying. "How lovely to see you again." "Lady Verena." Lena's voice was steadier than she felt. "I wasn't expecting to see you." "I'm sure you weren't." Verena's smile was cold. "I heard about your engagement. Congratulations." "Thank you." "Though I must admit I'm curious." Verena tilted her head. "What does one wear to marry so far above one's station? Is there a protocol for that?" Lena felt Alaric tense beside her, but she spoke before he could. "I wouldn't know," she said calmly. "Perhaps you could ask your grandmother. Didn't she marry up from merchant class?" Verena's smile froze. Murmurs rippled through the crowd, some shocked, some delighted. Lena had done her research. Verena's grandmother had indeed been a merchant's daughter before marrying into minor nobility, a fact the family preferred to forget. "Careful, Miss Varelli," Verena said, her voice dropping to something dangerous. "You're playing a game you don't understand." "No." Lena stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "You're the one who doesn't understand. You thought you could destroy me with rumors and schemes and planted evidence, but all you did was make me stronger. You taught me how your world works, and now I'm going to use that knowledge to change it." "Change it?" Verena laughed, sharp and bitter. "You're one girl. What could you possibly change?" "Everything." Lena's voice was quiet but firm. "I'm going to show every common-born person in this kingdom that they don't have to accept the station they were born into. That courage and intelligence matter more than titles. That the system you're so desperate to protect is already crumbling, and people like me are the future." The hall had gone completely silent. Verena stared at her, something like fear flickering in her eyes. "You're insane." "Maybe," Lena smiled, "but I'm also right. And you know it. That's why you ran. That's why you're here now, trying one last time to intimidate me, because you realize that if I succeed, if I actually become Duchess and use that position to help others like me, everything you believe about social order falls apart." "You won't succeed." But Verena's voice lacked conviction. "I already have." Lena gestured around the hall. "I'm standing here at the Winter Assembly as the acknowledged fiancé of a duke. People are listening to me. Some are even starting to respect me. You've already lost, Verena. You just haven't admitted it yet." For a long moment, Verena said nothing. Then she turned and walked away without another word. The crowd erupted into whispers. Alaric pulled Lena close, his voice low and proud. "That was incredible. That was terrifying." Lena's hands were shaking. "It was both." He kissed her temple. "But you did it." Lady Caroline appeared at her elbow, her eyes shining. "That was the most magnificent thing I've ever seen. You destroyed her." "I just told her the truth." "Sometimes that's all it takes." Caroline glanced around at the watching crowd. "And I think you just made a lot of allies without even trying. People love seeing tyrants taken down." Lena wasn't sure about that, but as the evening wore on, she noticed a shift. More people approached her. Conversations became easier. Even some of the nobles who'd been cold earlier seemed to reassess their judgment. By the time they left the assembly, exhausted but victorious, Lena felt something she hadn't expected. She felt like she belonged. Not because she'd changed to fit their world, but because she'd forced their world to make space for her. The wedding took place on the first day of spring, in Thornwood's private chapel. It wasn't the grand public spectacle some had expected. Alaric and Lena had chosen to keep it intimate, just close family, a handful of trusted friends, and the people who mattered most. Lena's mother sat in the front row, tears streaming down her face, wearing a dress Lena had commissioned for her. The dowager sat beside her, looking dignified and almost pleased, the closest thing to happy Lena had ever seen on her face. Lady Caroline was there, along with Philip Hastings, and a few other young nobles who'd become genuine friends over the past months. Even Lord Ashmont had sent his regards, along with a wedding gift and a note that simply said, "I was wrong about you. Well done. But it was the people standing at the back that made Lena's throat tight with emotion. A dozen women and men, servants from Thornwood, workers from the village, people from her mother's neighborhood, all dressed in their best clothes, all there because Lena had invited them, because she'd insisted that the people who'd shaped her, who'd given her the strength to survive, deserved to witness this moment. Alaric had agreed without hesitation. The ceremony was simple, no grand declarations, no elaborate rituals, just vows exchanged in quiet voices, rings that fit perfectly, and a kiss that felt like coming home. When it was done, when Lena turned to face the small gathering as the new Duchess of Thorn, she felt the weight of the title settle on her shoulders. But she also felt something else. Freedom. Because being Duchess didn't mean surrendering who she was. It meant using her new position to do exactly what she'd promised Verena she would do. Change everything. The changes started small. Lena established a fund for daughters of working families, providing education and apprenticeships that had never been available before. She opened Thornwood's library to local children, teaching them to read herself when no one else would. She hosted dinners that mixed nobility with merchants, forcing conversations between people who'd never spoken as equals. Some nobles left in protest. Others stayed and found themselves challenged, questioned, forced to defend beliefs they'd never examined. She was relentless. And slowly, impossibly, things began to shift. It took 2 years before the real breakthrough came. Lena was in her study, the same study where this whole story had begun, reviewing applications for her scholarship fund when Alaric entered, carrying a letter. "You need to see this," he said. She took the letter and read. It was from the Queen. "Duchess Thorn, your efforts to reform education access and social mobility have not gone unnoticed. I am writing to request your counsel on a matter of national importance. There are those in my court who believe the rigid class structure of our kingdom is outdated and untenable. I find myself inclined to agree. I would like to meet with you to discuss how we might implement broader reforms, changes that would allow talented individuals to rise based on merit rather than birth. Your experience navigating both worlds makes you uniquely qualified to advise on this matter. Please consider this an official invitation to join my advisory council. Her Majesty, Queen Isolde." Lena read it twice, hardly believing it. "The Queen wants my advice," she said numbly. "The Queen wants more than that." Alaric sat beside her. "She wants you to help reshape the entire social structure of the kingdom." "That's impossible." "You keep saying things are impossible," Alaric smiled. "And you keep proving yourself wrong." Lena looked down at the letter, at the royal seal, at the words that offered her something she'd never imagined. Power to change not just her own life, but the lives of thousands like her. "What if I fail?" she asked quietly. "Then you'll fail trying to do something important." Alaric took her hand. "But I don't think you will. I've watched you fight for 3 years. You don't know how to quit." "I quit once. I left Thornwood. You made a strategic retreat to protect people you loved." He squeezed her hand. "That's not quitting. That's courage." Lena looked at her husband, at the man who'd protected her, fought for her, loved her despite every reason not to, the cold duke who'd turned out to have the warmest heart she'd ever known. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it." "I know you will." He pulled her close. "And I'll be right beside you." Tuam. 5 years after a seamstress's daughter stumbled into the wrong room and changed her life forever, Duchess Lena Thorne stood before the Royal Assembly and presented the Education Reform Act. The chamber was packed. Every noble house had sent representatives. Merchants, guild leaders, even a few common citizens, invited by the Queen herself, filled the galleries. Lena wore a dress of midnight blue, her mother's stitching visible in the delicate embroidery at the hem, a reminder of where she'd come from, a promise that she'd never forget. She stood at the podium and spoke without notes. "I was born in a world that told me my station was fixed," she began. "That daughters of seamstresses became seamstresses, and that was the natural order. I was told to be grateful for scraps, to know my place, to never reach beyond what I was given." She paused, letting the words settle. "But then I opened the wrong door and everything changed." Soft laughter rippled through the chamber. "I'm not here to tell you that class doesn't matter or that birth circumstances don't shape lives. They do. But I'm here to tell you that we can choose to change that. We can choose to build a kingdom where talent matters more than bloodlines, where a brilliant mind born in a fishing village has the same opportunities as one born in a palace. Idealistic nonsense, someone called from the back. Lena smiled. Perhaps. But consider this. Every person in this room benefits from skilled workers, innovative merchants, talented artisans. Where do you think those people come from? They're not all born into apprenticeships. Many are lost because they never had the chance to develop their gifts. The Education Reform Act would find those people, train them, and make them available to serve the kingdom better than they ever could have otherwise. She gestured to the document on the table before her. This act proposes a network of public schools, funded by a small tax on noble estates. It proposes scholarships for exceptional students regardless of birth. It proposes apprenticeships with master craftsmen for those who show aptitude. It doesn't erase class. It creates mobility within it. And who administers this? A noble woman asked. A council of representatives from every social class, nobles, merchants, craftsmen, farmers, people who understand the needs of different communities. Lena met her eyes. The same way I understand both the world I was born into and the world I married into. You're one person, another voice called. An exception. That doesn't mean the system works. You're right. I am one person. Lena's voice strengthened. But I shouldn't be an exception. That's the whole point. There are thousands of people like me. People with intelligence, courage, talent, who will never get the chance I got because they'll never stumble into the right room at the right moment. This act gives them that chance. Deliberately. Systematically. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes, challenging them. I'm asking you to invest in your own kingdom, to stop wasting human potential because of outdated ideas about who deserves opportunity. This isn't charity. This is strategy. Build a stronger, smarter, more capable population, and everyone benefits. The debate lasted for hours. Nobles argued about cost, about tradition, about the danger of disrupting social order. Merchants argued about implementation. Common citizens, the few allowed to speak, argued passionately for the opportunity the act represented. Lena answered every question, addressed every concern, refused to back down. And when the vote was finally called, the Education Reform Act passed. Not unanimously, not even by a wide margin. But it passed. Lena stood in the chamber as the results were announced, feeling tears prick her eyes. Alaric was in the gallery, pride written across his face. Her mother sat beside him, sobbing openly. The queen herself stood and descended from her throne, crossing to where Lena stood. Well done, Duchess Thorne, she said quietly. You've just changed the kingdom. We've just begun changing it, Lena corrected. This is only the first step. The queen smiled. Then I look forward to the next ones. Jet. 10 years later, Lena stood in the garden at Thornwood watching her daughter play. Elena was 7, dark-haired and sharp-eyed with her mother's determination and her father's strategic mind. She was currently engaged in a fierce negotiation with the gardener's son over the rules of whatever game they'd invented. She's going to be trouble, Alaric said, coming up beside Lena and wrapping an arm around her waist. Good. Lena leaned into him. The world needs trouble. They'd had 2 children, Elena and her younger brother Marcus, who was napping inside under the watchful eye of his nurse. Both were being raised to understand that their titles came with responsibility, that privilege meant obligation, that they were fortunate and needed to use that fortune to help others. The same lessons Lena had learned the hard way. I got a letter from the Queen, Alaric said. She wants you to lead the Committee on Healthcare Reform. Lena groaned. I just finished the infrastructure project. You're too good at this. You've created a problem for yourself. I've created a purpose for myself. Lena turned to face him. Did you ever imagine this? When you found me in your study that night? No. Alaric's smile was soft. I imagined solving a problem. I didn't imagine falling in love with it. I was never a problem to solve. I know that now. He kissed her forehead. You were an opportunity I almost missed. Elena ran up to them, breathless and demanding. Mama, tell Jacob that queens can lead armies. He says they can't. Queens can do anything, Lena said, including lead armies. Why do you need to know? Because I'm the queen in our game and I need to fight the dragon. But Jacob says that's not allowed. Tell Jacob that if he's making up the rules, you can make up better ones. Lena ruffled her daughter's hair. And if he doesn't like it, find someone else to play with. Elena grinned and ran back to deliver this wisdom. Alaric laughed. You're raising a revolutionary. I'm raising a girl who knows she doesn't have to accept the world as it is. Lena watched her daughter disappear behind the hedge. Isn't that what you wanted? It's better than what I wanted. He pulled her closer. It's what we needed. That night, after the children were asleep and the house had settled into quiet, Lena found herself back in the study. The same study where everything had changed. She stood by the fireplace looking at the portrait that now hung above it. The official portrait of the Duke and Duchess of Thorn. In it, Alaric looked dignified and commanding. But Lena looked like herself, not trying to be someone else, not hiding where she came from, just herself, dressed well and standing tall, one hand in Alaric's and the other holding a book. The artist had captured something the original critics had hated, but Lena loved. She looked like someone who didn't quite fit the frame, like someone who'd forced the world to expand to accommodate her rather than shrinking to fit its expectations. Still admiring your handiwork? Alaric asked from the doorway. Lena smiled. Still amazed it exists. He crossed to her, studying the portrait. Do you ever regret it, opening that door? Every day. She leaned against him. And not once. That doesn't make sense. It makes perfect sense. Lena turned to face him. I regret the pain it caused. The fights, the fear, the times I thought I'd break. But I don't regret what came from it. This life. These opportunities. You. Soppy, he said, but his eyes were warm. True. He kissed her, slow and sweet, and Lena felt the same thing she'd felt the first time. The sense of rightness, of pieces fitting together that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. When they pulled apart, Alaric said, the first school opens next month, the one we funded in your mother's neighborhood. I know. Lena had been counting down the days. I want to be there. I assumed you would be, he smiled. Along with the Queen, apparently. And half the royal court. You've made education fashionable. I've made it accessible, Lena corrected. Fashionable is just a side effect. Either way, you've done what you promised. Alaric's expression grew serious. You changed everything. Lena thought about that. About the seamstress's daughter who'd stumbled into a world that wanted her gone and refused to leave. About the battles fought and won, the ones lost and learned from, the slow grinding work of changing minds one conversation at a time. She thought about the girls who would attend that school, who would learn to read and write and think, who would have opportunities their mothers never dreamed of. She thought about her own daughter, growing up in a world where her potential wasn't limited by her gender or her birth, where she could imagine herself as anything, queen, warrior, scholar, whatever she chose. And she thought about the boy who'd probably still argue about whether queens could lead armies, but who would grow up in a kingdom where such arguments mattered less and less. I haven't changed everything, Lena said finally, but I've started, and the people who come after me will finish it. That's all anyone can do. Alaric took her hand. Start, and refused to stop. Lena squeezed his fingers, feeling the weight of the rings they both wore, symbols of a marriage that shouldn't have worked, in a world that shouldn't have accepted it, creating change that shouldn't have been possible, but was. Because sometimes the wrong door led to the right place. Sometimes the girl who didn't belong became the woman who changed the rules. Sometimes love and courage and stubborn refusal to accept the world as it was were enough to build something better. Not perfect, never perfect, but better. And in the end, that was everything. 20 years after Lena Varelli opened the wrong door, the kingdom had transformed. Public schools stood in every major city. Scholarships sent common-born students to universities once reserved for nobles. A woman from a farming village served as the royal physician. A blacksmith's son had become the youngest Supreme Court judge in history. The old order hadn't crumbled. It had evolved, stretched, reformed itself around the idea that talent mattered more than blood. There were still fights, still resistance, still nobles who clung to tradition and commoners who believed change was impossible. But there were also victories. And on a spring morning, much like the one when Lena had married Alaric, She stood in the royal palace and accepted the queen's highest civilian honor, the Order of the Phoenix, given to those who'd transformed the kingdom through courage and service. For your tireless work in education reform, social mobility, and the expansion of opportunity to all citizens regardless of birth, the queen said, placing the medallion around Lena's neck. For showing us that our strength lies not in maintaining old hierarchies, but in developing new potential. For being living proof that anyone, from anywhere, can change the world. The assembly hall erupted in applause. Lena looked out at the crowd, nobles and commoners mixed together, her family in the front row, her mother weeping with pride, her daughter watching with fierce attention, already planning how she'd follow in these footsteps and go further. She saw familiar faces. Lady Caroline, now a vocal advocate for women's rights. Lord Ashmont, who'd become one of her staunchest allies. Even Philip Hastings, who'd apologized years ago for his initial doubt and now ran one of the scholarship programs. And she saw strangers, young people wearing school uniforms from institutions that hadn't existed when she was their age, their faces bright with possibility. This was her legacy. Not the title, not the palace ceremonies or the royal honors. The faces of people who'd been given chances they shouldn't have had, who'd taken those chances and built lives they'd never imagined. The seamstress's daughter had become a duchess. But more importantly, she'd made it possible for other seamstresses' daughters to become whatever they chose. As the ceremony ended and Lena descended from the platform, Alaric was waiting. He looked older, gray threading through his dark hair, lines around his eyes, but his smile was the same one he'd given her all those years ago when she'd been terrified and out of place and desperately trying to survive. "How does it feel?" he asked. "To be officially celebrated for making everyone's life more difficult?" Lena laughed. "Exhausting, wonderful, terrifying, like everything else." "So, typical day for you. Typical life for me." She took his hand. "Ready to go home?" "Always." They walked out of the palace together, Duchess and Duke, partners in everything, leaving behind the ceremony and the crowds and the weight of public expectation. Tomorrow, there would be more work. More committees, more reforms, more battles against the parts of society that still resisted change. But tonight, they would be just Lena and Alaric, in the home they'd built together, with the children they were raising to be better than the world they'd inherited. And that was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The girl who'd opened the wrong door had found her way home. And in doing so, she'd opened doors for countless others. That was the real magic, not that one person's life had changed, but that one person's courage had made it possible for thousands of lives to change. The seamstress's daughter had survived. And in surviving, she'd transformed not just herself, but the entire kingdom. One open door at a time.